Good morning everyone, I am Mr. Rish. Thank you for joining me for this video where we are examining a number of questions of the SAT subject test math style questions. Highly relevant, the type of questions that you would actually see on the SAT subject math test. Starting with this question right here. If y equals f of x, a function is represented by means of this curve, what would be the graph of f of x in terms of its absolute value? You would have to convert this into that. Remember, all the questions on this test would be multiple choice. We're not doing multiple choice here, but we're seeing how you would do each of these questions. Then you would obviously pick the correct multiple choice value. This is your f of x. What's the graph of absolute value of f of x? Remember, the absolute value would convert everything here with regards to a negative into a positive. So you would have a graph over here where all the y values in terms of the range must be positive. Wherever you have a graph extending into the negative, it must become positive. So this portion right here would become like that. That portion from here to here is just fine. It would stay exactly as is. And then this portion right here would shoot up. And your graph would be exactly that. There's absolutely nothing here with regards to negative y values. Everything must be positive because of the absolute value. This right here would be your answer. And it would be good. Question number 2, f of x is equal to cosine x. We have to identify this point P. What do you think it might be? We're looking here at everything here from domain 0 to 3 pi over 2. What do you think would be this point P? When you know the cosine function, you know this right here would be 0, 1. And you know this right here would be your first x-intercept, which would be pi over 2, 0. This right here would be your next x-intercept, which would be 3 pi over 2, 0. The value in between, what do you think that would be? Right here at value minus 1, that would be pi, minus 1. Because you know at a value of cosine pi, you have a value of minus 1. So your answer here would be pi, minus 1. You would have to identify this from the answers that are provided. Pi, minus 1 is the answer of this coordinate point P. Right here we have this representation of a right triangle, x, y, theta, and r. You know this right here is usually coming off a unit circle. Anyhow, what is r cosine theta times r sine theta? What is the value of that? You have to identify it from your list of possible values, your answer choices. You know r cosine theta represents a x dimension. The r sine theta represents your y dimension. Think about it. Cosine theta is equal to x over r. Sine of that angle is equal to the opposite, y over r. X is equal to r cosine theta, and then y is equal to r sine theta. So what would be r cosine theta times r sine theta? It wouldn't be r squared cosine theta sine theta. Your answer here would be xy. And that would be the answer that you'd have to find and identify it correctly to select it correctly and get your value over there and get a correct outcome. Xy would be your answer for something like this. We have to, in this question, identify the point P. We have a vertical line, x is equal to minus a, horizontal y equals minus b. The point P represents the intersection of those two, and you know this is not a hard question. What would that be? The point of an intersection of two lines is always represented as x, y. What would be your x and your y? It would be exactly what each equals, because this is the intersection of a horizontal and a vertical line. You have a single point of intersection, that would be minus a, minus b. And this right here would be the answer you'd have to find and correctly identify and select from your given choices of values. Minus a, minus b will represent your intersection point. Next question, minus 3, 2 represent the zeros of a function. What does zeros mean? These represent the values of x, which would zero out your function. What is that function? How would you go about doing this? You're seeing here that x is equal to minus 3 and x is equal to 2. These are your zeros of your function. The way you would handle this is take each of these onto the other side and make each of these equations equal to 0. X plus 3 equals 0, and then x minus 2 equals 0. Then you would multiply these two. You'd have x plus 3 times x minus 2. Then you would multiply these and develop your polynomial. You'd have an x squared. Then you'd have a minus 2x plus 3x minus 6. Your answer over here would be x squared plus x minus 6. That would be the function for which these two zeros are found, minus 3 and 2. This would be the answer you'd have to find and correctly select. Alright, next question. F of x is equal to x plus 1 over x, a rational function. You have to identify all the asymptotes. Your answer choices must be a combination of what you see over here. Which of these possible asymptotes represent true asymptotes for this function? Well, for the vertical asymptote, you always look at the lower denominator polynomial. And how would you zero it out? Just by putting a 0, you would zero it out, and that would represent a vertical asymptote. and then you know you're seeing an x equals 0, so this is one of your possible answer choices, because this would be one of those questions where you have combination style of answer choices. 1 and 2 only, 1 only, 2 only, 1, 2 and 3, none of the above, those type of answer choices. You'd have to pick the right combination. Anyhow, vertical asymptote is developed. There can be no oblique asymptote here because everything here in terms of the exponents are equal. So there's no oblique asymptote, but you can have a horizontal asymptote. Because both of these exponent powers are 1 and 1, you'll have a horizontal asymptote, but what will that be? Just take each of these expressions and divide by the highest order degree of variable exponent, and that'll give you exactly what you need. When you divide this, you'll have a 1 plus 1 over x in the numerator, you'll have 1. Limit as x approaches infinity, what happens? This becomes 0. 1 divided by a very large number of zeros out, you see 1 over 1, which is 1. And that tells you your horizontal asymptote, HA, is y equals 1. And right here. So you'd have to pick the answer choice which would say 1 and 3 only. And that would be your answer for this type of question. You have x equals 0 vertical asymptote, you have y equals 1 horizontal asymptote, and this right here would be your correct answer to the multiple choice question, and you would get it right. Next question, in how many ways can 8 students stand in a straight line with 8 spots? Think about it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The first student will stand over here. There will be 8 options. Out of those 8 students, this first student coming into the first spot has 8 possible options because they could have selected any of these. The next one would have 7, the next one would have 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 until all the spots are consumed. Your answer over here would be 8 factorial, and you'd have to bring out a calculator and figure this out. You do 8 and then the factorial, and you'd have 40,320. That would be the answer you'd have to select to get this question right, and it would be right. Next question, if the first number in a series is equal to 1, second number is equal to 1, and the next number or any number in terms of n is greater than or equal to 3 is always the sum of the previous two numbers, an minus 2, an minus 1, we have to find the ninth term. How do you go about doing that? How can you do that? Well, it's not hard if you start itemizing your things. The first number is 1, the second number is 1, and then each succeeding number is equal to the sum of the previous two numbers. The third number here will be the sum of the previous two, which is 1 plus 1, 2. The next number will be the sum of the previous two numbers, which is an minus 2 and an minus 1, which will be 3. The next number will be the sum of the previous two, which is 5. The next one is the sum of the previous two, which is 8. And you can see the idea here, 5 plus 8, 13. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The next one will be 8 plus 13 is a 21. And the next one, 13 plus 21 will be 34. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Here's my ninth term. Your answer here would be 34. This is a Fibonacci sequence question, and these show up on these SAT subject style math exams. That's how you would do it. Okay, we have to find the sum of this. We have to find sine theta, sine minus theta, cosine minus theta, cosine minus theta for any value theta, which means we're looking here at domains which are not restricted. How would you find the sum of this series? Think about odd and even functions. Sine is always an odd function because it has origin symmetry. Why is it origin symmetry? Because the curve looks like this. It's origin symmetry. The cosine is always even symmetry because it's symmetric around the y-axis. It looks like this. See, it's symmetric around the y-axis. You have to keep that in mind. Sine theta will stay as a sine theta because it's origin symmetry or odd function. Sine minus theta will become minus sine theta because of the odd function or the origin symmetry. Minus theta becomes a minus sine theta. Take any negative angle, do it sine. You'll get a negative sign, and I'll show you. Let's do minus 30 degrees. You do sine, you get minus 0.5, a negative value. Cosine is even function. Negative value in terms of a cosine is always positive. Do 30 minus cosine it, you'll get a positive outcome. See, positive. Cosine minus theta is positive cosine theta. Cosine minus theta is another cosine positive. These cancel out, but what you end up seeing here is a 2 cosine theta, and that would be the answer you'd have to correctly identify and select, and you would get it right. This plus this, 2 cosine theta, these two cancelled out because of the odd function quality of the sine function. We'll look at 2 more questions and then that'll be it for this video. Cosine x is equal to tan x. We have to find the value of x, a possible value. How would you go about doing it? Well, cosine x is equal to sine x over cosine x. You don't want to do any cancellation. You want to just take all of this onto the other side. You'd have cosine x minus sine x divided by cosine x. You don't want to cancel because you can end up losing out solutions. When you take it over here, you're left with 0. And now you do common denominator. Cosine square x minus sine x over cosine x is equal to 0. Take this on the other side. You'll have cosine square x minus sine x is equal to 0. You have a identity. Sine square plus cosine square is equal to 1. Cosine square is equal to 1 minus sine square. Bring that right over here. 1 minus sine square x minus sine x is equal to 0. Minus sine square x minus sine x plus 1 is equal to 0. You can do here a positive sine square x plus sine x minus 1 is equal to 0. I'm just flipping the signs around. You're really looking here at a u square plus u minus 1 is equal to 0, and do the quadratic formula. Run everything here through the quadratic formula. Minus b plus minus square root b square minus 4ac over 2a. You'll have a minus 1 plus minus b square, which is a 1, minus 4 times 1 times minus 1 divided by 2. You'll have a 1 negative plus minus root of 5 over 2. You can take out this minus 1 and shoot it out because it won't be acceptable. You will only have this value right here. Why will that minus 1 minus root 5 not be acceptable? Because it will exceed the range of minus 1 to 1 for a sign. It'll be outside that. You can't do inverse of a value larger than minus 1 or positive 1. Think about it. Let's do 1.36 hypothetical value. Inverse sign and you'll have an infinity. It's outside the range. But this certainly can be done. Put your calculator on the RAD mode. Do minus 1 plus root of 5 divided by 2. I'm getting a 0.618 is equal to u, which is equal to sine x. Do the inverse sine or the arc sine. You'll get 0.66 radians. And that right there would be your answer. 0.666 rads. What would this mean in terms of degrees? You can do everything here with regards to your calculator on the DEG mode. Minus 1 plus 5 root divided by 2 inverse sine. It means 38.17 degrees, but this answer right here is good. 38.17 degrees. Keep in mind, you cannot look at a value for sine or cosine outside of this range. It would be undefined. Let's look at now one more question and that'll be the end of this video. Last question, inverse function question. F of x is equal to 4 times the root of 2x. We have to find inverse function with the value 9 input. How do you go about doing that? You know, you're looking here initially at y is equal to 4 times root 2x. Find the inverse of this. Switch the variables around. X is equal to 4 root 2y. Solve for this y. You'll have an x over 4 is equal to root 2y. Take the radical on the other side. You'll have an x squared over 16 because it becomes an exponent 2 is equal to 2y. Y is equal to x squared over 2 on the other side is a 32. Y is equal to this. So now you know that your function in terms of its inverse of x is equal to x squared over 32. We have to find now this in terms of 9. How would you do that? You just put 9 in place of x, you'd have 81 over 32. You can do a decimal answer or you can leave it to that. I'll bring in a decimal answer. It would be 81 divided by 32, 2.53, and we can keep it to that. 2.53125. Either of these answers would be good. You'd have to select them from your list of possible values. And that right there will bring us to the end of this SAT subject test style questions. The refresher over here, just practice questions for any student interested in this. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.